But Jalen Hurts, like everybody else, gets to play the 60 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about this guy that some people want to narrow focus on his tough times, on his bad times, when he struggles, when he makes mistakes. I'll readily admit, woefully inconsistent, but the bad times are emphasized and the good plays are, well, he's supposed to do that. Really, do we judge anybody else in that way? When they do something very well, that's a given. You're supposed to be. When they do something, how dare he do this? What is it about Jalen Hurts? Now, this is just my take, John, and I could be looking at this all wrong, but it seems to me that his critics are much more outspoken when he does have inconsistent bad times and just kind of brush off any successes the young man has. Victorious, controlled their own destiny Monday here on Birds 365. You got your Mac and Mac guys, Jody McDonald and John McMullen. Hey, that was a pretty good second half yesterday, J-Mac.
Yeah, how about that? Solid scrimmage in South Philadelphia. That's what I'm calling it. Nice little scrimmage. Get the boys ready for some real football down the stretch. Although I don't know if they're getting that, to be honest, until the playoffs. We'll talk about the playoffs in a little bit. Yeah, man. I you know me, Jody. I tend to be very even-keeled, and I don't go to hysterics. Like, people are talking about the defense and Jonathan Gannon. People criticize me for being too nice to Jonathan Gannon. And then they go over the top and say, what a performance by the defense. Really? Well, they did what they were supposed to do, but that is legitimately, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, that is the worst quarterback play I've ever seen. I was ranking. I thought about Luke Falk last year. Luke Falk was better. He just had an unbelievable pass rush that was killing him. And you're a Jets fan. You remember
that was ugly.
Yeah, that was ugly. This poor kid couldn't do anything at a professional level. And I look at that New York Giants organization who just, hey, we're going to move forward with Joe Judge. How could you move forward with a coach who makes that kind of decision to put that kind of kid with completely no preparation, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever he's been there? I mean, it was hand the ball off to poor Saquon Barkley, who, by the way, is terrible as well, and RPOs and just one read. And my God, it was ugly. And it was a legitimate scrimmage. So Devin and Derek Gunn and Mark Barzetta asked me on the post-game show here on JAKIB Media. I'll get this out of the way quickly. Like, share, and subscribe. JAKIB Media YouTube channel. They asked me, what'd you learn from this game? Nothing. Eagles took care of business. And that's great, by the way. That is great. They slammed their foot on the throat of the opponent, as Alex Singleton would say. But I didn't learn anything. I mean, that's as easy as it gets. We always talk about there's no gimmies. Everybody's Alabama, Urban Meyer. No, for 1 week, everybody wasn't Alabama. This was Mercer. This was Alabama against Mercer. That's how lopsided it was.
As I was watching the game yesterday, I thought of you for one very specific reason. When Gardner Minshew had his come to Jesus moment as a Philadelphia Eagle, filling in for Jalen Hurts a couple weeks ago against the Jets. And you and I both expected a little bit more of a quarterback controversy than we got. Nick Sirianni put a stop to it pretty quickly after the game with his definitive stance of, oh no, Jalen Hurts is our starting quarterback. He kind of threw water on the fire. But you and I both thought that Eagle fans would find a way to stoke it a little bit. The reason why I gave that I thought Nick Sirianni was looking at the way he looked at it, in addition to the fact that I think he likes Jalen Hurts, I still think he believes in Jalen Hurts. He was being very realistic because yours truly and several of the guests we had on that week said the same exact thing. Yeah, but it was the Jets. and the Jets defense was awful. And the Eagles had wide receivers running wild and wide open in the secondary that Jody McDonald or John McMullen could have gone 9 out of 11 in his first 11 passes, while Gordon Minshew went 11 for 11. Yeah, the strength or lack thereof of the opposition must be factored in. So when I was watching the New York Giants on offense during that game yesterday, I thought of Johnny Mack, because I said, is he going to question again when I go, the strength of the opposition was pitiful. That's why the Eagles defense was as dominant as it was. Yeah, I'm glad to see you beat me to it. That was just, it was embarrassing.
Yes,
the Giant offense yesterday was stone cold embarrassing. Did the Eagles defense have something to do with it? Yeah, sure. I'm not going to give them no credit, but I'm going to be careful not to give them too much credit, because, yeah, I think Rankokas High's defense could have shut down the Giant offense yesterday.
Yeah, and that's why, people are saying, because the offense, Eagles offense, and we'll get into that as well. I mean, they were legitimately bad themselves in the first half, no question about that. And if when a little bit of hyperbole, I guess, when I say you don't learn anything, if this game ended up, I was never concerned that the Eagles would lose the game as long as Jake Fromm was in there. And how sad is it that Mike Glennon comes in and you're a little bit more competent? They should have started Mike Glenn just to have somebody who knows what to do behind the line of scrimmage. Obviously, he's not going to play well, but at least he knows the plays and he can handle the offense and some semblance of it, and it runs, and it doesn't look like a scrimmage. So if they ended up winning that game 10-3 or 13-3, it'd be one of those where you probably said you don't feel good about it afterwards. So you feel good about that they got some things going, that they dominated in the second half. And it makes you feel good moving into Washington. And boy, they look bad. But against a good opponent, a very good opponent, and Dallas, now that they're getting healthy. So now the Eagles have everything in front of them. Minnesota lost as expected to the Rams. So, all they have to do is finish it. And by finish it, again, you probably have to hope a little bit in the fact that Dallas doesn't have to play Week 18, because they're still in the mix for the number 1 seed. And as long as they are, that game's going to be really, really, really difficult. However, if they're locked into a particular seed by that point, it's hard to imagine they will be at this stage. But you also have to factor in there's only one bye. So how much do they care about matchups? How much do they care about manipulating where they're going to be in the seeding? All of that is going to come into it. But before you get to there, you should beat Washington again, even down there. This team is good enough to do that. And as I said, I give them complete credit for taking advantage of the soft part of the schedule. But I am surprised, and I'm glad you brought that up, Jody, because you as a Jets fan, and we were joking about it all the time. And you said, everybody says it's a Jets. It's a Jets. Why aren't they saying it this time? Because that team out there yesterday was far worse than that Jets team offensively.
Right. The Jets actually moved the ball effectively against the Eagles that game. Per 3 possession, they scored touchdowns. So at least they had one side of the ball that was playing effectively. Defense wasn't, and that's why Gardner Minshew did what Gardner Minshew did. The Giants stunk across the board. Where they defense
they played a good first half of defense, and it was pretty evident. And I gave Patrick Graham some credit in the fact that he realized, and this is a concern, by the way, because I didn't notice this as much on Tuesday, where I think Jalen Hurts ran it 8 times. They weren't running Jalen Hurts yesterday. I mean, and the Giants surmised that very, very quickly. And they said, all right, we don't have to worry about that aspect of his game, which is a pretty big part of it. Let's be honest, pretty big part of his skill set. And you take that away, and they figured it out, and they weren't worried about it at all. And that's why the Eagles struggled so much offensively. Then he started making some plays, making some deep balls, guys going up, catching it. there are other people as well, the drops. I'm glad Nick Sirianni went through that long dissertation, not quite as long as his game management one when he was in quarantine, but everybody went nuts when Dallas Goedert was open. You and I have had that discussion too, the screenshot discussion, where everybody just takes a screen. Oh, Dallas Goedert's by himself. Whereas the quarterback has a progression. He's already moved on. He's on to something else because that's what he's taught to do. And you can't assume the Giants are going to bust the coverage and leave somebody completely alone. So everybody was killing Jalen Hurts. That wasn't even his fault, which Nick Sirianni went out of his way to explain in detail for that very reason. So I like Nick from that standpoint as well as a coach. He tries to explain things as much as possible. Offensively, you had all the drops early. Dallas Goedert again. That's a bit of a concern. Miles Sanders, who, by the way, has a broken hand, so he's probably going to be out for a bit. 95% good. But it was the Giants. And maybe because it's a division rival and people don't know how bad that was. But I joke when I put up the playing time, I put up the snap counts every morning after the game on Twitter. I joke, scrimmage playing time. That was a scrimmage, Jody. That was a scrimmage.
A little bit. And I know we want to stay in the moment, the victory, where the Eagles sit, playoff possibilities, already looking ahead to Washington, who's limping back to their stadium after the beatdown they took last night at the hands of the Cowboys. But just a quickie future reference for you to remember next year. Not only was yesterday's win good for the Eagles in the moment, it's also good going forward because as bad as Jake Fromm was, as bad as Mike Lennon was, the Giants are actually going to believe that by comparison, Daniel Jones is the man. Are you kidding me? We got Daniel Jones.
He looks tremendous. Yeah. I mean, Daniel Jones looks like Phil Simms now.
Exactly. And he did beat the Eagles just 2 weeks ago. Daniel Jones is not a franchise quarterback. If I've got my choice right now, Jalen Hurts or Daniel Jones, easy. I'm taking Jalen Hurts. I'm not even batting an eye going forward with a quarterback. And we still don't know if the Eagles should go forward with Jalen Hurts. And I want to talk about plenty about him today. It's actually a real good thing if they're going to. I don't think it's 100% that Joe Judge is going to be back. I think that put that out there as cover to maybe keep the team together for this week, finish up the season, not have the coaches going to get fired hanging over their head over the last 3 games. I still believe there's a very good chance that they're going to realize we got to hire a new general manager and we can't stick this coach on a new general manager and say you can't fire him. So I think that could change. But I believe that they're going to stay with Daniel Jones, which I think is a major mistake going forward for the Giants. But Jalen Hurts, and I saw everybody, after every single game, you got to go in this great dissertation about the quarterback and the like. He's pretty good yesterday. Rocky start. No questions asked, put the football on the ground, got lucky that a ball wasn't picked. That was a terrible throw, and it was this close to being picked, but they rightfully overturned it. But Jalen Hurts, like everybody else, gets to play the 60 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about this guy that some people want to narrow focus on his tough times, on his bad times, when he struggles, when he makes mistakes. I'll readily admit, woefully inconsistent, but the bad times are emphasized and the good plays are, well, he's supposed to do that. Really, do we judge anybody else in that way? When they do something very well, that's a given. You're supposed to be. When they do something, how dare he do this? What is it about Jalen Hurts? Now, this is just my take, John, and I could be looking at this all wrong, but it seems to me that his critics are much more outspoken when he does have inconsistent bad times and just kind of brush off any successes the young man has.
Well, 2 things I would say to that, Jody. I don't know if it differs that much from any high starting quarterback in any major NFL city. They all get this scrutiny, every single one of them. And, as you gain sort of the reputation, Tom Brady at the top, Aaron Rodgers at the top. It sort of whittles away a little bit. But even, at the end of the Mike McCarthy regime in Green Bay, I remember, I always joked that Green Bay is the most spoiled fan base in NFL history because we're 33 consecutive years now of Hall of Fame quarterback play, and they don't know how the other half lives. And they were saying Rodgers doesn't have it. I was in Minnesota when Brett Favre was on Green Bay, and people would argue that Ty Detmer should start at quarterback over Brett Favre. People are nuts, Jody. And when you have good quarterback play, even at that top tier of a level, people find ways to complain. So that's number one. But as far as Jalen Hurts and his ability, I think the most unique ability is the guy never stops. And you go back to the first Giants game is probably a better example of that because that was his worst game. Certainly this season. You could argue last season as a rookie, but I'm throwing that out because they weren't even preparing for him to be the starter. It was a last second thing. There wasn't a lot to build upon. It was just to finish up an ugly season. So I'm just going on this season, and that was by far his worst game. But he was still there for the full 60 minutes, making a play here, making a play there, and putting the Eagles in a position to where they could have stole the game, and you can argue should have stole the game if Jalen Reagor makes a couple upcatchable passes. You don't often see that with quarterbacks. In other words, if you have a bad game, you have a bad game, and you start to get down about yourself for whatever reason. Maybe it's the pass rush. Maybe things are just not clicking, and bad game turns into bad game. He's got the ability to make a play, so you got to be on your toes as a defense for 60 minutes. You might be dominating him, and the Giants were able to do it for 30 minutes, and they dominated again. And you're starting to say, well, the Giants maybe just have his number because they shut him down the first time as well defensively. Maybe Patrick Graham sees something. And as I said, they were very aware he was not going to run the football. And they were forcing him to throw the football and making it very difficult. A lot of blitzes because they knew he wasn't going to get outside the pocket. They knew he was going to stay and throw it. So they took advantage of that situation, and I think they deserve credit for it. But, I mean, you go back to any starting quarterback. You've been in Philadelphia longer than me, Jody, covering this team. I mean, everybody. Jonathan McNabb was a great quarterback. How much what did he get? Randall Cunningham, Mike Vick, everybody, except maybe Nick Foles. Nick gets a pass for some reason. That's the question. Now he got some, back in before he was Saint Nick, he got some, but now he's got a pass.
Which, by the way, came off the bench and won a game for the Bears yesterday.
And Carson Wentz, I didn't even obviously Carson Wentz. I mean,
he heavily scrutinized. Yeah. All right, then let me ask you this: as you correctly pointed out, Jalen Hurts had 6 pretty bad back to back. How many backs do I have to put in to get to 6 quarters against the Giants? And then he put up a 31 spot in the last 2 quarters, the second half of yesterday's game. What do you think changed?
Well, I think when you have a couple things, I think from a complementary aspect, I think that Giants defense played its what off in the first half. And then they come out in the second half and you say you're in this game and the worst throw humanly possible. Now, potentially, Jannard Avery should have gotten called for a penalty on that because he got his hand up into the face mask. But they didn't call it. Awful throw. Rodney McLeod playing center field gets the easy interception. You have the short field. Game's over. The Eagles score. Giants defenders know they're watching the same thing you're watching. Human nature, whatever you want to call it. You're like, oh, we're done. We're cooked. And from that point, the wheels fell off. That's what I think happened. Honestly.
Okay, that's a very honest answer. I hope you're wrong because that's not giving much credit to Jalen Hurts. And if you don't believe he
Well, you still got
deserves
to
all
make
that
the
much because
plays.
the Giant defense said, all right, we busted our ass for a half. You think we're going to go out and stop him again here in the second half? No, that just isn't happening. You might be right. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm just hoping that you're wrong because it would give Jalen Hurts some credit for what he accomplished. And, oh, by the way, I haven't been on WIP yet. So, yeah, I got some tweets about the Eagles after the game from my Eagle fan followers. I'm glad to say, not surprised, but I'm glad to say that I didn't get any tweets. One of the downsides of yesterday's game, there were a couple of them, bad penalties. They took a bunch of bad penalties again yesterday, and it ends up not costing them, so it doesn't get all that much notoriety, but they did take some bad penalties. One of which was Devonta Smith on a bad downfield blocking before the receiver got the ball type penalty. Yeah. I was glad to see that I didn't get any tweets on, well, if Devonta Smith was a little bit bigger, he wouldn't have had to make that block the way that. I'm so happy to know, because there was a lot of it, J-Mac, here on this show, my other broadcast outlets. How can they take a wide receiver in the first round who's 160 pounds sopping wet with a rock in his pocket? A big wind comes by, this guy's in trouble. This guy's a stud. This guy is going to be a star wide receiver in the league. He's borderline there now. When the Eagles get a couple more things in place, I think his game is only going to grow and get better. And please, for any of those of you who reached out to me and said, Jody, I don't know why you love this guy. He's a reed. He's a twig. He's going to be falling apart in the National Football League. How's he doing? With that skinny little body of his. Doesn't keep him from making great plays along the sidelines. Didn't keep him from going up and high pointing a underthrown pass by Jalen Hurts for a 35, 40-yard gain. Where are all those Devonta Smith can't play in the league because he's too skinny Eagle doubters, Johnny Mac?
Yeah, well, that he can't play in the league was hysterical. But, I'm more in a little bit half and half, not half and half, but, I think Devonta is a tremendous player, way ahead of the game when it comes to route running. Although I am a little bit concerned that this team can't run a simple rub route in week 16 with Mr. Wide Receiver, Mr. Technician coaching the team. I mean, there's got to be a little bit more savvy at some point. I think that's one of the things you can criticize. I'm more happy that nobody complains about the officiating, but they don't claim because it was a blowout, so they don't care. If it was a close game and there were some questionable calls, then they start complaining about the officiating. So that part is understandable. I do think from this standpoint, it's realistic. It's not optimal to be 166 pounds and play professional football at this level. As we always say, 100% injury rate in the NFL. You're going to get hurt. Demonte's already gotten hurt. He wears an elbow brace every week now because he's banged up. If you think about Darren Sproles, for instance, I mean, people have asked me, is Darren Sproles a Hall of Fame player? And it's an interesting conversation because of his history as a receiver, as a runner, as a returner, and how he was able to do it for so long. And he played for so long at 5'5", and and I always joked about Darren Sproles. He wasn't small, he was short. But even that, when you don't have a certain measurable in the NFL, it limits you to a certain degree. In other words, Darren Sproles was never going to be a feature back in this league. Why? I mean, he lasted. He was durable. He was strong. He's the strongest guy on this team, pound for pound. I mean, he's unbelievable. If you ever saw his lower body. Why? Because of the size issue. When you look at Devonta Smith, imagine Devonta Smith with the athleticism and the route running and everything he has now at 200 pounds. He's better equipped to hold up long term. I think that's fair to say. To say he couldn't play in the NFL because at 166 pounds, anybody who watched him, that's not fair to say the least.
Right.
And yeah, he's the best receiver this team has had in a very, very long time.
I don't want to mix apples and oranges, but I think it's apropos here. If you took a look at Allen Iverson coming out onto an NBA court, you would go, this guy's on the team? Really? With his size? With his build?
Yeah, they're different guys. They're guys who break the mold, and that's a good example. But even with Allen, you say, boy, if he took better care of himself, he could have lasted a little bit longer. You know, Allen, for those who don't know, like the casinos, like to go out at night. Didn't necessarily.
But that's a whole nother argument. Did he dedicate himself? I'm just talking about physical frame. Look at him, the rigors of the game that he's asked to play. Allen Iverson looked like he shouldn't be in the NBA. He's the greatest sixer guard of all time. Yes, Devonta Smith doesn't look like a wide receiver in the NFL in 2021. Oh, except he is. All he does is go out and make plays. So before you just make a generalization of it.
And by the way, Jody, also you got to think about the era, add into it. There are no Jack Tatums in the middle of the field who can destroy. It's taken out of the game. So maybe in a different generation, it was a more legitimate question mark as well, where you would really take a beating going over to the middle of the field. They've taken that out of the game. You can't do it. So it's similar as quarterbacks. You know, I saw Jaws was on Twitter showing we used to get hit. Quarterbacks used to get hit. And those guys took a beating. Receivers took a beating. No more. So that plays into it. That factors into it as well.
He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We're a victorious Birds 365 duo today. Second half, the Eagles just dismissed the New York Giants after playing a less than stellar first half, certainly offensively, pretty good defensively, and ratcheted up in the second half defensively. Yeah, and I don't even count that late Giant touchdown. Talk about an by the way score. That's what that Giant
was. Mike Lennon was Phil Simms compared to Jake Fromm.
Yeah, he's certainly better, but not good by any stretch of the imagination. So the Eagles, as of right now, are in the playoffs. If the playoffs were to start today, they would be in the playoffs. We got a lot of playoff looking forward to do. We'll be doing it each and every single day this week, including for a couple more hours here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel.